All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Instructor Phil Demetriadis, and what we're going to talk about today, we have a couple things. We're going to talk about drawing people, and I decided to implement the wooden mannequin into part of our discussion. There's a reason for that, okay? So before I record all this and start drawing, I want to tell you this. I have some new due dates up here. As a reminder, I'm not going to be here next Wednesday, okay? So for next Monday, you're going to do a whole bunch of drawings of the mannequin. I might even increase this towards the end of the class, okay? And then you're also, the following Monday, you're going to have other drawings done. Also, I'm going to cover a new subject matter on Monday as well. So this coming Monday is October 30th. That's when you're going to have your 10 poses due. I'm going to walk by and check them off. It's going to be a minimum of you either going out observing people out in public, or if for some reason you're one of these people that are scared of the public and you can't go outside, I put this link right here. You see it? What does it say? Line of action. If you click line of action, like I just did, it will take you to here. Line of Action is a great free site where you can draw nude models, decent models, all models, both genders, only male, only female. So if you are of a particular religious preference or whatever it might be, you can choose whatever you like. You can do different times and seconds. If it takes you 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want, boom, you hit get drawing. So if I were to say, give me decent models, I want both genders, I can do that this class mode. That's a little bit longer. Let's say, to be honest, I don't want you spending more than, that's why I'm going to increase your drawings, than maybe 2 minutes per sketch. There's a reason for that. I'll talk about that in a minute when I'm sketching. So if I do 2 minutes, I hit get drawing, bam, look, there's a guy modeled. There, and I start drawing, okay? Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about perspective, but I'm going to wait on this. First, I want you to get used to, if I throw too much at you, it'll overwhelm you. First, I want you to be able to look at this guy, and what you are going to do is you're going to draw my buddy right here, Fred. Okay, this guy right here. And I'm going to draw for you today and show you how I do it and how I work and how I learn this. I was taught this method, to give credit where it's due, by a gentleman whose name is Don Lagerberg, who was the instructor over at Cal State Fullerton. He's since retired, who was in charge of drawing and painting. He was very serious about drawing. I learned a tremendous amount of information from him. Marshall was also teaching me about this because when I was here taking perspective classes, composition classes, we talked a little bit about drawing from not just your imagination, but drawing things that you see and being able to draw them in multiple views. And that's one of the best reasons why we go out and draw people, is that people that are walking at a target or doing something, they stop and then they change and they move in another pose. So you have to finish the pose on your paper. That is a great trait to do, and it teaches you a lot about how to draw. And here's the benefit of the mannequin. Look, you can pose a mannequin, and you can get all kinds of wonderful variation poses. Hey, everybody, where's the party, right? Okay, and so you can pose a mannequin and get all kinds of feeling and gesture out of them. Okay, absolutely. So when I see students come back with drawings and they're like, I couldn't get anything, I couldn't get that. No, you didn't try hard enough, and you weren't thinking about some basics that I'm going to show you about today. Okay, so look at that. They can even interact with each other. Lovers forever, okay? All right, so I'm going to put all these images up for you, up on the blog when I finish today's little lecture, okay? So before I start, what's important is this guy right here. I'm not going to draw him because I'm going to start posing him. What I need you to do is understand his basic proportions that are in here. And there are a couple basics. I'm going to pull them up right now, and I'm going to talk about them. Now, what I'm going to talk about isn't necessarily true for every single mannequin. They make mannequins all over the world, and one of the problems that you will see is sometimes they make mannequins a little bit differently, which is fine. By the way, if you want to get a mannequin, and you want to get really good at drawing people, I highly advise it. Because guess what I had to do back in the day? Buy a mannequin. And we had to buy, you don't want to buy the cheap one that's $5.99 that's like this big, which is like 6 inches. You want to buy the guy that's about 20 bucks and is about that long. And before you buy him, you want to take his arms and articulate them and move them and make sure that his arms and legs can articulate and move well. What taught me how to draw the figure is when I was around Don Lagerberg. Then Don made us do a couple different things to this that are really important. Number one, we had to start off, but I don't have that much time. This is applied perspective. I needed to sort of run into this, but I'm going to give you some tools that you can use. By the way, I do cover this next semester in basic drawing for entertainment art, And this is why we go out and we start sketching people all the time. So in that class, we learn basic shapes, we learn shapes rotating, we learn how to draw and move multiple shapes, and then we start drawing people, and then we start doing little field trips out to downtown Disney, into the Arboretum. We draw plants, we draw people, we draw all kinds of things, right? The success ratio in that class skyrockets because I show people a really simple process on how to draw, and that's what I'm going to show you a little bit more today about. Okay, 2 little steps to apply to your mannequin. First, let's talk about some basics and what's happening in here, but I just want to point these out to you. Okay, number 1, here are the most important things, is you have these round little circles here. These circles you always want to put in, and there's a reason for that. These circles represent the round, movable joints of the human figure, okay? And they are like connection points. So by sketching these little circles in, they actually help you to think about how the foot is positioned or how the hand is positioned, because it allows you to connect another shape on top of that. And here's what I mean. So if I'm sketching somebody's hand, and if I'm thinking about the direction of the hand, and I have part of their forearm that's coming down like this, all I have to do is think about a center line going on top of my circle, and then I just have to think about coming here and connecting a box frame like this on top, like that. You see that? Then that gives me the basics for a hand. Now, that's even getting more complicated putting the box. What I love about the mannequin is they even simplified it more. They did this. Dun-da-da, dun-da-da. Bring your center line. Dot, 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 dot. They make these little cutoff hands, which are great. They're basically these. I'm moving my hand with no fingers. You can add fingers later. Who cares about that? When I look at portfolios of student work, especially when I was working in entertainment, I did it at Disney, I did it at Mike Young Productions, I did it for Big Idea, I did it like 4 different places. The most common thing you see, and I even see this in our students who are coming to our free drawing events for easel, okay? People leave out the hands and the feet and often never finish the head because those are the hardest things to finish. So it's really common to see those things missing. If you work on part of your approach and take the basics that we're talking about here today and start applying them in your drawing, I guarantee you after a couple weeks of time, your drawings are going to be so much better and you're really going to understand how people work, okay? So number 1, one thing I've noticed is that people want to leave this stuff out. Don't leave them out. These are, I'm going to put here, these are pivot points. That's why they are important. That's why the mannequin has them. They are pivot/hinge points, okay? Notice that word hinge. Why would I say hinge and not something else? Because this is what a hinge does. A hinge on a door tends to open only so far and then it comes back. Guess what? Most of the body is created on hinges, okay? For example, the hinge of your wrist, you go from here, and you go right about past 45, and you get to about there. So that's not quite 180, it's about 160. Everyone has their hands up now, right? That's why in figure drawing, the instructor gets you to take your pencil and hold it like this, vertically. Because now what am I drawing with? Now I'm drawing with this. What is my hinge operation of my shoulder? It's 360 degrees. So I could be much more gestural and I can get a lot more on the drawing, and then when I want to get details, I switch to this. After a lot of time spent drawing, okay, and sketching people, like you'll notice Mike and I, we start turning the pencil sideways. We use it all the time. We put little nudges in and we use this because this is a more expressive form of drawing. After a while, after a little bit more skill and mileage and training, this becomes joined to this. So when I'm sketching out in public, I will lock my wrist and I will use my arm. And see, my wrist is not moving now. It's locked. And my arm, I'm sketching gesture lines using this. So that's a huge transition there and a huge step that deals with drawing. I'm pointing these out to you, these little, I'll call them fill factors, right? So you're aware of these things and you start thinking about them when you draw. So I'm going to make a little comment on there. I'm just making a joke calling it the fill factor, okay? But there are things I just want you to think about. Number 1, I'm going to put drawing from the wrist. There is a reason why you have a limited movement because of the size of the hinge. Number 2, I'm going to put drawing from the shoulder okay, holding your pencil sideways. That changes the way that you draw. That's why, you know what's funny is sometimes if I talk to instructors, they don't even know why when you go into figure drawing, why you hold the pencil or the charcoal up vertical like this. There's a reason for it. Because when you're doing this, the other reason too, which I totally disagree with, it was a form of measurement. Where people go like this and they measure people and they go, there's your head, now putting your head on the paper. I hate that method. I do. I've never liked it whatsoever because there's actually changes that can happen in the perspective when you're measuring somebody or in a distance that aren't conveyed in the drawing. But that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, okay, so back to this. Number one, these were the pivot points of our guy. Okay, so the next thing you need to think about is the relationships of pivot points. What I mean by that is notice that the edge of the elbow lands about right there. Okay, so you could learn this from your mannequin buddy, or you could just stand up at home and do it yourself. If you stand up right now and take your arms and put your arm in here and raise and take your elbow and grind it in, what are you hitting? You're at top of your hip bone. Look where the elbow is right here. It's right on top of the hip bone. Okay? That's important. That's a relationship-based involvement of where the hinges are landing. The other thing you could do is let's look at our mannequin. Okay? Now, I don't have balls right here on my legs. Okay? I don't have a ball joint. My joint is actually up here where my femur connects into my pelvic area. Okay? That's what they're trying to show you, but they're simplifying it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. However, though, if I look at my wrist, see where my wrist is, and if I do this with my hands, and if I put my hand in towards like this and see where my hand drops, you see that? So I'm basically taking this hand, and if I put this hand in like this, okay, you can see where that hits. It lands right in the middle of that sphere. Those are the relationships that you want to know, because when you're drawing somebody posed in multiple poses, you have the ability now to think about a couple of those things. Okay, that really starts to aid to you. The other thing is outside of the relationship of the pivot points. Okay, here's something else that maybe you didn't think about. Every one of those pivot points is also something else in figure drawing. Does anyone know what it is? It's also a bony landmark. Okay, right here at the tip of the shoulder, right in there, you have part of your bone that is exposed where all three of your deltoid tiers come together. Okay? Also, right back here is your elbow. Right up here is your wrist joint, like this. Touch your wrist. You can see it. You have two parts. You have your radius and your humerus there, right? So you can see part of each bone and you can feel it. They're identifiable. Okay, reach down and you could even touch on top of your hip there. That's what represents the top of this guy right here. That's your hip, another bony landmark coming out. Reach down, you have your patella, which is your kneecap, right? And then of course, even down here, you have your little bone that pronounces out the side, your ankle bone that's also coming out there as well. Those are all bony landmarks. There's another bony landmark that I skipped over, but I'm going to mention it on the back side of my character right here, on this lower back segment right here. If you all take your hand, touch up here, go scroll right down, you'll find a big bump here. That's your 7th vertical vertebrae. Okay? That now you know something that other people don't even know. Now you know that not only does this mannequin represent drawing, it also is giving you the secrets and the hints to where all the bony landmarks are. That's huge. Because later on when you get into anatomy, what do all the muscles attach to? To the bones. And if you know how the muscles flow over the bones, you've simplified part of your education, your processing. Okay, however, this class isn't on this. This class is a perspective class, and where I need to teach you and give you some basic fundamentals on how to draw people. Now, there's one other thing I want you to do, I would like you to consider doing, and this also tends to be a little bit harder. Okay, so number 3, these are, I'm going to put down over here. These were the benefits of the mannequin. Manikin, by the way. I always misspell that. Okay? All right. There's one other thing I'm going to write down here with a little star, which is, not that it's optional, it's a little bit harder to do, but it really does help you, and it helps me tremendously when I draw, is you have to understand the X and Y axes of the figure core shapes. And I'm going to draw that for you today. And this is what I mean. And this is where, when I had Don, if I was teaching this class here, I would make you do what Don made us do, which is we took our wood mannequin and we had to take a blue line and do this. We had to go over every surface and we had to draw a blue line going like this all the way down our character. Then we had to draw the blue line going down the leg. Then, after we finished all that, we then had to turn our mannequin sideways. And then we had to take a green line. And then, I'm going to cheat it here. And then we had to come back here and draw the green line going this way on the mannequin like that. And then, so my blue line then would be here like that. Does that make sense? Okay. That way we understand the X and the Y axes, the opposite angles to each other. Okay. With that said and done, now I'm going to put this away and I'm going to sketch for you for a little bit. Okay. So this is all being recorded. Let's say file. Let's, gosh, I'm almost scared to turn this off. Usually I save my files. I'll just sketch on, let me just add my image size here. Image size, canvas size. Let's bring you out. Oh, I'm in pixels. What is that in inches? Oh, that's cool. Let's go width. Let's go 40. Let's just double it. Boom. There we go. All right. Okay, so this is what I do. Now I'm gonna teach you two basic approaches to starting with your wood mannequin. Hopefully this will help you. Okay, here's approach number one, is that if you start, there's another hinge to the body that I just talked about. The hinge to the body is this, okay? It's understanding that you have a waist, okay? You have a sort of like a waist here. Attached to this waist is this other block that represents part of the pelvic area. So let's go back, let's look at Mr. Mannequin here. Okay, so there's the little waist, here's the little pelvic area, and then up here is the upper torso. Okay, so when you start to draw on your character, if you're getting stuck, so notice I'm overlapping part of my character here, right? If you get stuck, this is a great simple way for you to draw, is you start with this. Number one, some people, there's different names for this, but we basically are starting with the torso of the body. Okay, so that's just a side view. What's cool is if I do this, and then I come in here, and I start putting angles on the person that I'm drawing, okay? This is a great way to think about how I'm sketching an individual that's sitting down now. Do you see that? Because it immediately establishes form inside part of my sketch and part of my drawing. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I can go into this and I can add on top of it. That's method number one. So method number one, when you see, because this is what happens, is you guys are out there drawing and sketching and you see somebody walking and you freeze up and you're like, oh, they moved. What do I draw? They're gone. They dropped the bag. The mom's not yelling at the kids anymore. How do I communicate? That's one of my favorite things, right? When the mom's like, I told you to get in that damn cart. And the mom's like yelling at the child. Okay, so this is starting with the torso. Okay, method number two, and when I draw, is I start with I'm going to call it line of action. I'm going to put in parentheses here, in relationship to the head ball. Okay, so this is what I'll do, is a lot of times when I'm sketching, let's turn off Mr. Mannequin here, I come over here and I'll see somebody sitting a certain way and I'll go like this and I sketch in the head ball and then I'll go just woof and I throw a curve in right there. That does a lot for me because now I see the head ball shape, and you can just come into your drawings all weekend long and just go like this and you can see where it takes you. Okay, because it's going to take you in all different places. Now I fill the information out. Here's how I fill the information out. Again, I go back and look at Trusty Mannequin. Okay. Eventually, over time, what I would tell you to do is you buy the $20 mannequin. I always hear from students, I want to get better, I want to be an amazing draftsman, blah, 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 blah. Here's what you do. You take your mannequin and you pose them in front of you. Not hard poses. You put them on everything. You put them on books, you put them on shelves, you put them in front of you, you open them up, you put them in gestures, you put Velcro on his foot and make him stand one-footed like he's doing something. You pose the mannequin and you draw it over and over and over and over and over until guess what happens, folks? You memorize it in here. And when it gets memorized in there, you're now able to come in and you're able to say, hey, if I have somebody's head ball here, that's part of that neck joint, okay? So I know that maybe part of their torso might be sort of angling down this way. That might be part of their waist in here. Okay, maybe they're sitting down, okay, at a bench, and then part of their butt is coming down to about right here, okay? Now remember I had that little leg, little joint for the leg. That can, some mannequins can move a little bit. What I like to do, notice this, folks, what's Phil doing right here? He drew through the shape. And I drew through the shape because now I could come here and go, I have one there, I have one there. Those act as connection points for me. So now if I want to draw a leg of an individual sitting down, that's going to be my leg of that person connecting up to that joint, right? Then I can come back to here and I can draw that same thing and I have that leg. Okay, and then I can come back and I can draw their knee. I can figure out where the base of their leg is going, and then I have that next joint. And then the foot is really simple. It's that half shaved off sphere. It's like that. Okay? Boom, that's done. And then maybe this person, you know, maybe they're sitting here. It's actually, it looks like they're about to take a dump, but I sort of don't like that right now. So let's say this person is, the other leg is going up this way and it's elevated for some reason. Okay? And let's say here they're sitting on the base of a chair of some kind. Okay? So now I can come in here and I just pose the rest. I have that knee, I have that leg that comes down to here. I can feel where it ends. And then where that ends, I can put the foot down there like that. So maybe I have their shoulder. That shoulder connects up, and I have this cylinder that's in here, and then their elbow's here. Their hand comes this way. There's another joint there, and maybe their hand's curved a little like this. And right here in their hand, they're reading a magazine, okay, or a menu. And maybe as they're sitting down here, oops, this individual is waving at a particular friend, okay, and their hand's going upward like this, like that, okay? That's all it is. That's my basic sketch. I did that pretty quickly, right? I sort of don't like it, but that's okay for right now. I keep hitting that dumb move thing. They need to separate the rotate from there. So now I go back to this. I started from here, right? I come in here. I put something down that represents part of the neck. Okay? So I have right there with that circle there, it allows me to see that shape going in two directions. One, ready for this? It allows me to see if that was the neck connecting to the back of the head like that. You see that? How that could work? Or it allows me to see that this is the front of the face and then that is the neck. Does that make sense? So I can draw that person in two different views if I wanted to right now, based off of that little line that I have. Okay, so let's say I want it to be where that's the center line of the face, and I come in here and I put that other cross. Now there are some really fancy terms to use for this, the misogynal version of the plane of the face and all this. And to me, that's not really what matters now. What matters is understanding the proportions of what you were sketching, right? So I have the neck here. I can come over here and I can sketch in the basics of someone's torso. Now, the mannequin I had this cool curve like this, and I really liked it. It would come down here, and then it had sort of a round element like this on the chest. What I liked about that, it was showing, indicating that there is a chest plane, and then it curves, okay? So then I could come in here and I put the side on. I might come back over here. Okay? So do you see how part of my figure is now coming alive, existing? Maybe this individual looks like they're looking down. So maybe they have their hand out like this. And then I'm gonna foreshorten something. So when I draw that circle, that's my connection point. That's the base of my cylinder. That's gonna be the base of the arm coming right. Then I put that circle here. Here's the hand. So maybe this individual is looking down at a map of a subway system. He's holding it in his hand, right? And then is this individual standing, okay? Maybe his other arm is just sort of dangling from here. and maybe his hands just sort of hanging downward like that. Okay. All right. And then I come back into this, and now I think, okay, Phil talked about connections. So I have these spheres here. Maybe he has all his weight on one leg. So maybe I have this leg coming forward like so. And then that's part of the knee. Comes down to here to the base. That's part of the foot. And then maybe this other leg is maybe he's like standing there with it's on its toes. So he's not really putting his full weight of his leg on there. So maybe the other leg is going backwards like this. There's part of the knee. And then maybe the other leg's actually sort of like, hold on. Let me change the direction of that. I'm going to bring it more towards us. So maybe he's here like this. Maybe the leg's coming this way, sort of like that. And then here where that connects, then the leg's going backwards like this. And then there's the ankle. And then here's his foot sort of in the back. Does that make sense? Like their foot's up against a wall or something. So do I have a model right now in front of me? No. Do I have a mannequin in front of me? No. Right? I mean, I'm just doing this really I hate lecturing while I'm drawing sometimes because it doesn't allow my brain to fully focus on something. And when I go home and draw, I just draw and then I just voice over it, right? But do you see, this is how I come in and I start to construct my peoples. I have an understanding of what the form is. And then from here, we're going to also talk about, real quick, not now, but later on, we're going to talk a little bit about drapery and folds and hands and feet. All that intertwines with this because basically what I have here are a series of shapes that exist in perspective. Okay, so that was the line of action method. Here's this other method that I was doing, the torso method. Here, what's going to be helpful for you is you need to get in this habit of drawing through your shapes and understanding what is on the other side. The reason why this is so important is it allows me to see, hey, here's the neck shape, and then here's part of the head of my mannequin as it comes up. Okay? And then I can draw through here and I could say, hey, even though I don't see that round sphere there, I see where the connection is, right? And now that I know where that connection is, it allows me then to say, hey, I'm going to foreshorten this arm and make it get smaller. So maybe it lands here. There's part of the elbow. And then maybe this guy, I don't know, maybe he's fighting off, maybe he has a butcher's knife in his hand, right? So I can take his hand, put it up here. Maybe, actually, hold on. I'm going to split it the other way. Maybe he's got his round hand and he's got a butcher knife and he's fighting off evil people or something, right? There. Okay? So there, he has his knife up, right? Maybe his other hand's coming backwards now. So I can come back here. Since I have that pivot joint, everyone skips the pivots. I'm like, worst decision ever. I know that if this is something you can do that'll help you, is I look at this pivot joint, and if I put a center line over it, and realize that there's a circle right there, okay, it allows me then to see that my cone shape will be connected in that direction. So actually, let me do this as a layer overlay, and I'll draw it in a couple different angles. So now I could come in here, and I could say, oops, let me do it like this. That if his arm's coming towards me and being foreshortened, it's ending up like that, and then maybe he's reaching back down this way. Maybe he's a police officer and he stole this bad guy's butcher's knife, right? And now he's reaching down with his hand, and he's reaching for his sidearm right here. Let's just draw a sidearm as a box. That's his sidearm, okay? And maybe here's his hand, and he's reaching down for it, right? Okay? And then I just keep adding to my individual here. I come through, I realize, hey, there's leg one, leg two. Maybe he's doing some weird move where one leg's coming out, so I come back to this. And I have this leg, perhaps it's coming out sort of in this direction. Maybe he's running and jumping, I don't know. I'm just sketching. Maybe this leg's a little foreshortened. Maybe his foot's a little bit more like this, right? And now he's running with, reaching for his gun and a knife, killing dragons or something, right? But just have fun with it, you know? So I come in here, and then I'm going to take part of that shape. I draw it this way. The other leg's coming to about there. There's the knee. There's the base. And now I can foreshorten a little bit more. I can get his ankle in there. And I can even figure out here's part of his foot as he's running forward or moving, making a pose or whatever, right? Okay? You don't have to be 100% correct on all your poses. That's not really what's important. What's important is that you just think about these shapes and you get them to make sense. So maybe instead I bring his arm down this way. Maybe it's really foreshortened where we have something like that, and maybe he's like, maybe he's like kung fu. He's like, hey, hold on a minute. He's got this little kung fu pose or something here, and maybe his legs, he's more in like a what I call like a preparative stand, where his legs are like this, and maybe he's got one knee forward a little bit. Maybe this one's sort of coming forward a little bit more. Okay. All right. There. Okay. Maybe that's the pose he has. But do you see, I can just come back into this and I can start posing my character as much as I want. And it's one of the reasons why I don't like drawing characters from a side angle, because there's no depth on it. Side flattens characters. So if you go home and draw this and you draw all of your mannequins from direct side view and direct front view, it's going to be boring, right? So you have to, that's what I was doing here, is the sketching part of the proportions. But even if I did this, I could still turn the form. And here was the great thing that we learned from Don, is that looks like it's from a side view. All I have to do is come over and put a center line down the front like that, put a line in there for the chest, and then I could realize that this shape might be more like this, and that there's maybe an arm joint here that comes down into here, and then actually maybe I have this shape on my person right here standing. Okay, so then I could come back into this, and then I could start filling in and putting more detail. Okay, so maybe the arm's coming out a little bit, and here, maybe it's going to their side, like that. Maybe that arm's coming down here as well, and then it just sort of drops down to their side, and their hands coming this way. And then I could come down, I could finish the legs. So you'll notice one of the things I start doing when I'm drawing is when I'm sketching really quick, I start doing this thing where I'm doing like this. I just did it here, see, watch. I do a circle, which is the joint, the leg, circle, leg down. And I might come here and I go, this leg is going to go that way, circle, it's going to come down into here, foot. The only thing that's missing is now me putting on the other line that shows more of the shape or the form of what's happening to part of my character and how it's transitioning. Okay? Like so. And then I just define it out a little bit more. Does that make sense? Because now I have more shape to that. Okay? So that's it. I mean, look, I'm just sketching really quick here. And do you see how I start to get the feeling of someone coming alive? Now, I don't like this boxy shape for the upper body. I'm just doing it real quick for you guys. I really prefer Fred, my buddy at home, that I still have to this day. And I really like his chest and his back because he has this sort of nice curve shape like this to him. And then he actually sort of rounds right here and then goes this way. And I like that because it allows me to find the joints. It allows me to think about where the neck would be. It allows me to position where part of his head might be moving and how it might be changing. Fred has a really big head right there. There, let's give him more of a base head like that, okay? So now I could, if I'm coming in here, this is just my mannequin. There's a bunch of different mannequins. Mine's a little bit more rounded like that. Sometimes I start with both approaches. Sometimes I draw, maybe this guy's sitting down and he's like waving his hand like, you shut up, right? And maybe his hand's sort of foreshortened like this. His arm, coming in here, and then it's foreshortened again. And then maybe his hand's like waving at someone in here. Okay? And then I just keep it like that. So maybe I start with a little bit of a line of action, but then I'm always coming back and I'm telling myself, what's that lower shape? Okay? And what's really cool about this sort of method of drawing is it all sort of makes sense. And eventually, this, understanding these proportions, when you get into more in-depth anatomy, it leads you to this beautifulness. Where you're taking the shape, and then you're doing this, and you're really understanding part of the cut-through of what the torso's doing, and then on the base of this, understanding that there's a dotted line coming through, because you basically have on the back side here, that coming off of this, you have your vertebrae. And when you get that vertebrae into a sketch, and then you get a little bit more adapted at what you're doing, you can now start thinking about some of these shapes like this, and how that vertebrae comes to the middle. And then you could come in here and then you could do the same thing. You can start thinking about the insertion points. And again, you come back in here, and all of this is just the skin going on top of the body, understanding the bony landmarks, understanding these transitions and how part of this body to the hands, understanding that, hey, you have a deltoid that's in here, and then after your deltoid, you have a tricep. That tricep comes down. You have a bony landmark right there. You have a supinator muscle that wraps over the arm that comes back down into here. You have a bicep that's right in here, and then boom, now you're starting to get into all this detailed anatomy, and you're really starting to get a much better understanding of how the human figure works, okay? Which is much more advanced. Now, I don't do this all the time. To me, this is much more advanced. This stuff right here really this isn't in my mode of thinking right now. It's not what I do, and it's actually nothing that I've ever had to do with animation. Now, the one thing I do is when I'm sketching characters of different sizes, okay, like I've been working on a bunch of gorillas lately, is I think about their weight and their body mass index in relationship to Fred, to my mannequin. So when I'm sketching a character, like if I, back to drawing there. If I have a really heavy set character, I'm thinking of my gorilla. My gorilla exists in this shape right here. That's his upper torso, and then he has this really heavy set body like this. Does that make sense? See how I drew his body? It's much wider. Then I could come back and I could think, well, gorillas have these really long arms that come down, okay, and they have these like huge fists, and they have these big like hands that fit together. So then you see how some of the weight starts to come. I'm looking at my gorilla from behind. Maybe his leg comes in here, it's foreshortened a little bit, and then it comes back here. And he's got these big like feet, So I'm going back to shape and basic principles. So it doesn't matter if I'm drawing a gorilla really quick here in a demo for you, or if I'm coming in and I'm thinking, oh, I have an elephant. And the elephant to me exists in large rectangular boxes, and all I have to do is I have to get in there, I draw through the other side, I come in here and I start to figure out part of the midsection of that animal, and then I start to figure out the back section, and he's got a tail, and he's got literally these like huge gluteus maximus muscles in the back, and then his head, he has a round shaped head, his ears usually in a triangle that comes forward, and then he has his large shaped trunk that comes off of that. So you see how I'm getting now an elephant out of there? But I'm not looking at reference, am I? I could look at reference. I don't have an elephant in front of me, but I'm just mapping out the shapes, and I know how these shapes exist, and and I could come back to the legs, and I understand from sketching and going to the zoo and doing all this stuff how all this, my character is starting to come together here. So I could go into more detail, and I could find out if it's an Alaskan elephant, or excuse me, I was making a joke there, but if there's no elephants in Alaska or Denmark, but I could figure out if it's an elephant from the Congo or from India, or you know what I mean, wherever. There's going to be different types of elephants with lots of specifications, but I have enough shape and form just to draw the person. So I just want you to get used to, this is what I do. When you see like Mike or me sketching, this is how I sketch. I'm sitting down, I'm looking at somebody in a coffee shop, and they're sitting there, and they're drinking a cup of coffee, This is how I'm sketching. I've just been doing it longer than you, and I'm going up to the same principles, and I'm just throwing down what I'm seeing. And I'm just, look at what I have here. I'm not spending too much time right now, am I? I'm doing this in a matter of seconds. They're like, oh, I'm getting a cramp in the side. Maybe the other leg's coming this way. Maybe their foot's coming down. That's it. Boom. Done. The next one. The next one. I just keep knocking them out every time. And that's it. So this is my version. This is like Smooth Fred. This is Phil's version of Smooth Fred. But you'll notice a couple of things that are always in the back of my mind, which are this. Doot, 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 center line, right? And then if there's that center line, I also have this other center line that goes down this way. And then as that arm turns, you have the red center line coming down that way. Does that make sense? Then it goes across the hand right there. So that's the benefit of always drawing those opposite X and Y axes lines on your person, is I'm always thinking about where these land on part of my character and how to fit him together or her together. Top, bottom, and then I know I have that shape that it exists. Does that make sense? That's ingrained in the back of my mind. That was put there by Don Lagerberg back in the day, and it's never left. And I got to give credit where it's due. It also came from Mr. Egan when I had, here's another instructor here for figure drawing. He used to go over this stuff all that. I used to hate it. I'd like be doing a drawing, he'd come by and he'd grab my chalk, and he'd just walk up to the drawing and he'd be like, oh, where's your center line? You know, and I'm like, no. It was all rendered. And then that's where I realized rendering sucks sometimes. Rendering is just detail on the surface. And if I don't get my proportions down right, and if I'm not making my leg feel like it's weighted and correct, and understanding where the kneecap is, and understanding where the other kneecap is, and how this individual, might be standing, and how their arm connects to their hip, and how their hand connects to their side. I mean, I need to know those things to make a pose feel realistic. And if I don't do those things correctly, no rendering is going to save it, is it? It's not, and you know that. And that's one of my things about when people over-render things. You're putting it's like taking someone who's really ugly and putting a ton of makeup on their face. It doesn't make them prettier. You know what I mean? It doesn't. You can't hide. And there's form and foundation and structure. What's really important is you guys have this ability to look at your drawings, and I know someone's going to do this. Someone's going to come back in, and I'm not going to see any of this. And none of this is going to relate. And they're going to be like, what do you think about my drawing? I'm going to go it'd be all right if your proportions were right. Okay? And then just to comment on this, the next section we're going to with this is the beauty. When you understand shape and form, if this person has a jacket on, and that jacket comes around like this, and then drops off and falls behind them, okay? And if that jacket then comes down, and you have a tension point, and then the fabric will now gather around part of that tension point, and you get folds in part of the body. And then you hit a straight tension point, and then you might have another fold or two that comes down depending on the bagginess of what the clothing is. Does that make sense? So even from this point forward, even when you get into hair, you get into eyes, you get into all these detail, everything is dictated upon that shape and form. So if I'm actually sketching someone in a coffee house and I want to get really detailed, the first thing I'm looking at is I'm now sketching their clothing wrapped over the form. Okay? Absolutely. I mean, that is, if I'm looking at someone's hat, I have to think to myself, okay, this was the mannequin head. How do I simplify that mannequin head like this with a jaw into a human head? And then there's still the neck. You see how that still fits together? And then I still have a hat that this individual might be wearing, okay? And that's a huge hat, by the way. Maybe I tie a little bit more. Maybe it, comes up here. It's one of those old, Frank Sinatra hats with a little bend in them or whatever, right? There, and I get my hat, but I understand that this part of the hat has to sit on that part of the head, right? And then you get in all your little details. Maybe you come in here and you put your ear in. You know that people have hair or a sideburn. You have a center. You understand where, this character might have a little eye in here. Might have his little nose right in here. You might have a smile that's up in here, and then you have your chin. You know what I mean? You start adding all those little elements or details to make the person come alive. But before you get to that, you can't do that without having structure, So I go back to Mr. Fred right here, okay? So I'm not asking you to go out and buy a mannequin because some of you don't have the budget for that. I get it. This is not a figure drawing class. However, though, this is a perspective class. And one of the most common, difficult, hard things to draw is people, especially when people are moving, okay? Our next lecture, when I talk about this, is how to draw this guy in relationship to a horizon line. I'm not doing that right now. Right now, I'm giving you freedom to just sit on a piece of paper and come over here and start, okay? So as a quick review, okay, we talked about, really quick here, the two approaches. One was starting with a torso, that if you're really getting stuck, come over before you draw your character, draw this torso and understand this basically is one large hinge shape again, right? You see that? You have that hinge shape, okay? Start with that. Then from there, add the other elements on. If you think you're a little bit more gifted in drawing and you're feeling a little bit more luckier, start here with the head ball and put in a line of action, and then add on top of the line of action. If you see someone standing, you come down, you want to throw a line in there. That's how I start. And to be honest, I do both when I draw. And I want to expose you to two different approaches because actually one of these approaches, this method with the torso, I'm adding lots of shapes. Sometimes on the other one, I'm adding, but I'm also subtracting a little bit because I'm putting shapes in and then I carve into them or I'm turning the torso or whatever, right? If you do this on a regular basis, look, I have this guy with his kung fu pose and the knife here, right? I don't have someone actually standing in front of me. I didn't have to pose him. I didn't have to take a picture of a friend, okay? If you do this over and over, and I'm even rusty at this, you get better and better at it, okay? And that's one of the things, you know, when I go to the drawing, the easel events, I sit there, you know, and in my sketchbook here, I have a bunch of sketches of our last model, right? And then to be honest, I get bored a little bit. I do that as my warm-up. And then when I get bored with that, I have to go in and I have to draw gorillas. And then I go draw gorillas and funky monkeys and stuff like that. So this leads you to that. If you want to go into character design, you want to be a visual development artist, and you know nothing about shape or form, go to the back of the bus, you know, join another parade because you're not going to get there. This is the foundation. Like I told Dan in the beginning once when I first met Dan, I'm like, if you want to work on really stylized stuff, you want to go into like Cartoon Network, work on really fun, different shows, you have to, in order to do it, you have to understand the rules so you know how to break the rules. And one of those rules for you guys right now is proportion and shape, and then the relationship and a perspective rule, okay? All right, so this is your homework. So look real quick here. I put it up. Uh-oh, that's line of action. Okay, and what's cool, look, you don't like a pose? Boom. Like I don't like that guy upside down on the ceiling, but there's a bunch of other poses. So you can draw people. If you're drawing muscles, you're doing something wrong. If you're drawing the Michael Jordan symbol on the side of his shoe, you're doing something wrong. You're not drawing the basic shapes. I mean, I don't need to look at that person to see their shapes that they exist in, okay? All right, so for your homework, actually, I think it would be fair. I don't think it's too much. Hold on, it looks like I accidentally, Art 243, okay, F. So what I put on here is do a minimum of 10 poses. I'm gonna make that 20 poses, okay? The reason why is you should not spend more than 3 or 4 minutes on a pose. Okay, I'll meet you in the middle, 15 poses, all right? I know, 20's not that much. I know, I feel so bad, and I'm just like, everyone's like, can we use Mike's homework for the class? I'm like, just go draw, you know? 20's not bad. It's really simple, and that's
really not that
really,
bad,
yeah. Is that how many pages you guys have?
10 pages.
Oh my. In 1 week?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. See, that sometimes I push the envelope a little bit more in some of my other classes. This is an intro class, so I don't want to scare anyone away and try to keep it somewhat mellow. So I'm gonna update this right now in front of you. Okay, so and this is why I'm not going hardcore on you. Okay, is that this is really just beginning for some of you in here, and it's just really simple. I'm telling you guys, you know, what's the golden secret? Do I have to eat magic peanut butter and walk a block a day and eat a special shellfish to become a better artist? No. You just need to sit and draw and do the work, okay? So anyway, 20 poses there, and then that'll be due on Monday, right? On Monday then, I want you to work on another 20 poses, but then I will not be here on Wednesday. On Monday, I'm going to come in, and I'm going to start lecturing about our next subject matter, which is something that everyone in this room hates, ellipses. Okay, we need to talk a little about ellipses and get that subject matter done, so then we can move to 3-point perspective, okay? But we can't do that until we get ellipses done, because that's a real problematic thing to cover. All right, any questions? Real quick. Have fun. Yeah, the rest of class, which is another 2 hours to draw your mannequins. If you want to go on campus and draw people walking around, if you want to sit in here, I would be fine with that. But I'm not going to put line of action up here because I'm going to sit and sketch on the Cintiq while you guys are working. I'm going to work on gorillas and other stuff. Okay? All right, thanks, guys.